Hey everybody, you're watching Edified Productions, and today I'm going to be showing you a modification on a client's 10.5mm fisheye. This is the Nikon crop sensor variant of the Nikon 16mm f2.8 fisheye. This is the AIS version. There is an AF model as well. This lens is my own, you can tell because I've dropped it. And I've already modified the focus ring on mine to be extra heavy and smooth, and just generally I had to adjust the front element to get ultra sharp corners. And not all 16 fisheyes, at least the AIS models, have those sharp corners, so I have probably one of the best performing 16 AIS fisheyes in the world. So on to the 10.5. My client is using this on a Fuji camera with an adapter, so they will not ever be using the autofocus. And the manual focus ring is kind of trashy. It feels a little really thin and dry, and they don't like that. So I'm going to be disassembling this down to either the geared focus mechanism or to the helicoid itself to add as much dampened grease as will allow, and then reassemble it. So as always, we'll be starting at the mount, and let's remove these 3 screws around the insert first. Now this lens is unique in a lot of its construction actually. As you can see here, this is the gel filter holder. It just spins freely. But if we turn it to here, it just pops right off due to those little notches, and they go on these little plastic spacers here. So now let's remove the screws holding the ribbon cable and electronic connections on. And now let's remove the base screws. And here we have the internals. Here is our little AF screw. And here's our infinity focus spacers. And as you can see, this is typical AF series fashion. The focus ring turns a large mechanical assembly, which then attaches or connects to a series of gears that then connect to the focusing helicoid. This is a very common design. I don't like it, but it is used in many AF series lenses, including my 105 f2 DC. From here, we will remove these 3 screws, and then we will carefully lift this outer shell up and off. Why we need to be so careful is this focus ring encoder over here. These feelers are incredibly sensitive and can be damaged very easily. This is the series of electronics that tells the camera how far away you are focused. It is the D component of an AFD lens. This specific lens has a very short focus throw, so it's a very short piece of electronics. But we will now remove these 2 screws. And you have to be extremely gentle and careful when dealing with any sort of encoder, zoom encoder, or focus encoder, because they are extremely easy to damage. I've got a pair of tweezers to grab this one with. This is still in perfect condition, so there's no adjustment necessary for that. I'm going to set it off to the side in a safe place. And this is the first time I'm disassembling this lens down to this degree, so I'm going to be learning as I go here. We're going to remove the gearing mechanism right here. And here I'll give you a more in-depth view of just how this operates. So as you can see down in there, you see the gears that the ring is turning. You can also see this is where the gears do attach, the gear for the autofocus mechanism. And it actually appears that in this specific lens, the focus ring actually does directly move the helicoids. It is not just by the gears, as I said before. Next thing is to remove the little cover over the ribbon cable so that it does not get damaged in any subsequent movement. That just goes off to the side. Now we'll remove these 3 screws because it appears that for the CRC of this lens to work, which is floating elements, this assembly holds the rear optical assembly, and the assembly just underneath it, which hopefully I can show you here. You can see it creating space there. That focuses the front assembly. So I have to remove this. And now that the assembly is removed, we can see its own little focus adjustment spacers here. We'll get those removed. These are also incredibly fragile, so you do not want to damage them. There's 2 in my specific lens. As I don't quite know how to further disassemble this lens at the moment, I'm going to now remove the front optics so that any underlying mechanisms are visible. I'm going to... There's not really anything to mark in terms of where these are supposed to turn to, so I'm just going to mark the hood, which I'm going to get a silver Sharpie out since I can't really scratch plastic that easily. Normally I'd be wearing gloves, but since this is exploratory, I don't tend to bother. And I end up cleaning all of the optics I open up anyway. And I would wear gloves for that entire process. So here is our front element group. We'll put that in the same place as our rear element group. So now we can see how the front element assembly connects with the focus ring. It is this whole system here. Okay, so it did require me getting my cheaper Chinese lens spanner, but I was able to get this main front assembly loosened. And a word of caution, make sure you are extremely sparing with your acetone and putting it in very careful spots, because the external barrel of this lens is plastic and you will melt the plastic. It is a plastic that can be melted with acetone. Of that when operating on this lens. There is also a publicly available repair manual available that I found in the course of making sure that this front assembly comes out this way. So if you need to reference a repair manual, that is available. Here we are. And as you can see here, here's some foam felt like material for the focus to smooth out the whole focus system. And as you can see here, where the acetone damaged the plastic outer barrel, that isn't a problem for me. I'm going to refinish all of that anyway, but that is something to take note of. Here we have our aperture assembly down in there. And if you've seen any of my other videos, you know aperture assemblies are probably one of my favorite parts of any lens. They're just really cool to me. And now that that front element assembly is removed, we can remove the whole focus mechanism, which is going to be involving removing all of these screws. All right, now that I've removed the aperture assembly, once again, I can show you just how cool I find aperture assemblies. I absolutely love these things. They just look so cool. So I just realized I've been recording my entire video in the wrong resolution. Anyway, ignoring that, so here we can see how the rear moves very slightly, but the front moves a lot. That's the floating element system. There is technically a helicoid deep inside of there, which is driven by the gears of the system. And it's kind of odd. It's not quite a helicoid in the traditional sense. it is a bunch of threads that move in and out, but it is not connected to any focusing mechanism aside from the rear assembly here, which is where the focus ring attaches and where the autofocus system attaches. All right, so I skipped a few things, but we now have the two internal helicoids separated, and I'm going to now add grease to these so that I can add the damping to the focus ring. Originally, I thought I was just going to have to add felt to the outside of the focusing mechanism because I didn't think that the focus ring connected directly to these. It technically does through a roundabout way with screws. It doesn't connect in the traditional sense, but this should still work. For this specific project, because this is two entirely different systems and I'm not entirely sure how these larger helicoids are going to play with such a small system. Like, these are very large for the components that they're moving. In the 16mm f2.8, the helicoid is about this thin and it moves a lot more glass. So I'm using white lithium, which is much smoother than the grease I would normally use, like red tacky or heavy duty grease, which would make this very stiff. So I'm just going to grease this, and then I'm going to move it around with, I prefer to move it around with cotton swabs. I know a lot of people will get mad at this specific method for greasing this, but it's how I do things. It works great, and clients are happy with the results, so leave me alone. All right, and now the focus assembly is completely back together. And when I was putting this focus ring back on, how it attaches is it slots on and then turns into a groove with three little standoffs that go into that groove. I greased those with my heavy duty, very tacky grease so that it's also ultra smooth. And then the internal helicoids were, of course, with white lithium. And this is perfection. The internals were designed to not use grease. So when you add grease, it's just perfectly ultra smooth. And this is just a beautifully mechanical lens now. And I absolutely love it. And now we have the integrated hood back in place. I have attempted to refinish all of the plastic that was damaged from the acetone. Realistically, I think I could have gotten that front element assembly loose without using acetone, but also realistically, that's not realistic at all. It just doesn't work that way. Maybe in a perfect world, I can get lucky enough to get something that stuck loose without acetone. In any other world, not quite. All right, and here we have our 10.5mm completely reassembled with a fresh, nice, and damped focus ring. It was heavier, and then I started testing autofocus on my D300S with it, and now it's slightly lighter. I guess the torque of the autofocus distributed the grease a little bit differently, but it's very smooth and very nice now versus the really wiry, light, gross feeling it had stock, because it's an AF series lens. That's just kind of how they were, but this is genuinely quite nice, and I'd even be okay with this being on an AI or AIS lens. This is very nice, and I'm sure the client will be very happy with it. The entire reassembly was fairly straightforward, same exact process I did to disassemble it, just in reverse as usual, and it wasn't that difficult. I don't think I'm going to make a disassembly guide video on this lens because there is a repair manual publicly available. So my video would be even more redundant than a lot of my disassembly videos already are. Like, there are usually people who have done videos on these lenses before I have, but usually if there is a repair manual available, I just tell people to use that. It's definitely going to be better than pretty much any other source you can get, at least for accuracy. Yes, a video is easier to visually follow, but a repair manual will tell you exactly what you need to do no matter what. So that's the resource I suggest everybody use. Once again, let me know in the comments what kind of format you would like for just modification videos. If you would like to see the full disassembly and reassembly step by step, or just the important bits and the general overarching concept of the video, and then the modification portion itself. This is probably going to be significantly longer than I anticipated, simply due to all of the steps I kept in, which I really should not. But let me know what you'd prefer to see in the comments. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Subscribe for more videos similar to this and reviews. I'm doing budget photography equipment reviews now, and I will be doing many more modifications, cleanings, disassembly videos, and more. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. I'll see you next time.